Picture this for a moment. A tomato plant in your backyard so loaded with fruit that the branches actually bend down and touch the ground. Red, ripe tomatoes everywhere you look. So many you're giving baskets away to your neighbors, and they're begging you to stop. That's the kind of harvest most gardeners dream about every spring, but only a handful ever actually get. Here's the secret. There is a simple white powder that costs about $3 at almost any garden store. Old farmers have used it for over 100 years, long before liquid fertilizers filled the shelves. It's not a new product, not a TikTok trend, and not some miracle fertilizer in a fancy bottle. It's been sitting on garden store shelves the whole time. But here's the part nobody talks about. Most gardeners today buy this powder, sprinkle it around their tomatoes, wait a few weeks, see no difference, and decide it doesn't work. They give up and go back to expensive bottled fertilizers. The truth is, they made 4 very common mistakes without even knowing it. In this video, I'll walk you through all 4 mistakes, and then show you exactly how to use this powder the right way, so your tomatoes come in heavy with fruit this season. That white powder is bone meal, and bone meal is exactly what it sounds like. It is animal bone that has been processed, dried, and ground down into a fine powder. It does not look exciting, it does not smell like something that belongs in a fancy garden center bottle. But inside that simple powder are 2 things tomato plants need when they are getting ready to carry a heavy crop: phosphorus and calcium. Phosphorus is the nutrient most gardeners connect with roots, blossoms, and fruit set. With tomatoes, roots are everything. Weak roots dry out faster, struggle in heat, and drop more flowers. Strong roots pull more water and minerals from the ground, which helps the plant hold more tomatoes through the season. That is why old farmers put bone in the planting hole. They may not have called it phosphorus, but they saw the result. Bone meal also contains calcium. Calcium helps strengthen the cell walls inside the fruit. But this is where many gardening videos get it wrong. Bone meal can help if your soil is truly low in calcium. But blossom end rot, that black, sunken spot on the bottom of a tomato, is often not caused by a lack of calcium in the soil. Many times, it happens because the plant cannot move calcium into the fruit when watering is uneven. So bone meal is useful, but it is not magic. It will not replace steady watering. The other important thing is speed. Bone meal is not a quick liquid fertilizer. Soil microbes need time to break it down. It works slowly, quietly, over weeks and months. And that is exactly why one correct application at planting time can feed the root zone through the season. Once you understand that, the 4 mistakes make a lot more sense. Because most gardeners are not failing because bone meal is bad. They are failing because they are using it in a way the soil cannot use. The first mistake is the one almost everybody makes. They buy a bag, sprinkle a little white powder around each tomato, water it once, and feel like the job is done. But that is not how bone meal works. Bone meal needs 2 things before your tomato plant can use it. It needs steady moisture, and it needs contact with living soil. The soil microbes have to break that powder down slowly before the phosphorus and calcium can move into the root zone. When bone meal is left sitting on top of the soil, most of that process never happens. The sun dries it out. The wind can blow it away. A hard rain can wash it across the bed, and if it stays dry on the surface, it is not feeding the roots. It is just sitting there like dust. And there is another problem most people do not expect. Bone meal smells like bone. You may not notice it much, but dogs, raccoons, and other digging animals do. And when that smell is sitting right on top of the soil, they do exactly what animals do. They dig. A tomato plant that looked perfect yesterday can be pulled halfway out of the ground the next morning. One night of digging can destroy weeks of work. The correct way is not to leave bone meal exposed on the surface. It needs to be buried in the soil, down where the roots will grow, and where the soil stays moist enough for microbes to do their work. We will go through the exact planting hole method in a few minutes. For now, remember one rule. Do not leave it sitting on top. Bury it where the soil can use it. Even when gardeners do bury it, many still make the next mistake. And this one does not look dangerous at first. It actually feels like good gardening. The second mistake is thinking more bone meal means more tomatoes. That sounds reasonable at first. If a little phosphorus helps roots and fruit, then adding more every few weeks should make the plant even stronger, right? That is exactly how a lot of gardeners get into trouble. Bone meal is not a fast fertilizer that disappears after one watering. It is a slow-release amendment. Once it is buried in the planting hole, it breaks down gradually in the root zone, It is meant to work slowly over time, not hit the plant all at once. So, when a gardener adds bone meal at planting, then comes back 2 weeks later and adds more, then does it again a month later, that extra phosphorus does not simply vanish. It can build up in the soil. When phosphorus gets too high, it can make it harder for the plant to take up certain trace nutrients, like iron and zinc. The gardener thinks the plant needs more feeding, but the real problem is that the soil chemistry is getting out of balance. One warning sign to watch for is yellowing between the veins of the leaves, while the veins stay greener. That does not always mean phosphorus is the cause. Leaves can yellow for many reasons, but if that yellowing shows up after repeated phosphorus feeding, do not automatically add more fertilizer. Many gardeners see a weak plant and reach for another scoop, but the plant may not be hungry, it may be overwhelmed. For this method, treat bone meal as a once-at-planting amendment, not something you keep adding out of habit every few weeks. Put it in the hole correctly, let the roots grow into it, and leave it alone. If your tomato plant looks weak in the middle of the season, do not assume it needs another dose of bone meal. We will talk about that mistake later. Adding more without knowing the cause can make the problem worse. Use it once, use it correctly, and do not chase every tired leaf with more white powder. The third mistake is buying the wrong kind of bone meal. Most gardeners think every bag is the same, but finely ground bone meal and coarse, gritty bone meal do not break down the same way. Bone is tough material. It is built to last. If the particles are too large, they may still be sitting in the ground after this season's tomato crop is finished. That is why texture matters. A good bone meal for tomatoes should look more like powder than gravel. The finer it is, the easier it is for moisture, soil acids, and microbes to work on it. When you are standing in the garden store, do not just grab the first bag you see. Turn the bag around and read the label. Look for words like steamed, finely ground, or powdered. Steamed means the bones have been processed before grinding. Finely ground, or powdered, means the particles are small enough to break down more easily in garden soil. A cheap, coarse bag is not really cheap if your tomato plant cannot use it in time. A small bag of good, fine bone meal usually costs only a few dollars. The real trick is not buying the biggest bag. It is buying the right texture. 30 seconds reading the label can save you an entire season of wondering why nothing happened. Quick reminder before we get to the fourth mistake. If this is helping you avoid a mistake you have made before, hit the like button so more gardeners can see it too. The last mistake is one most people never even think about, and it has nothing to do with the bag. It has to do with the soil itself. The fourth mistake is using bone meal in soil where it cannot work well. This mistake frustrates gardeners because they can do everything else right and still see almost no response. The reason may be the soil pH. Bone meal works best when the soil is slightly acidic to neutral. That little bit of acidity helps release the phosphorus so the plant can actually use it. But when soil is alkaline, especially when the pH climbs above 7, that phosphorus can become much less available. The bag may not be bad. The nutrient may be sitting in the soil, but the plant may not take it up fast enough to matter this season. That is why one gardener may swear by bone meal while another says it did nothing. Their soil is different. So how do you know if this might be your problem? Look around your garden. Is the bed close to a concrete sidewalk, driveway, patio, or foundation? Concrete can raise the pH of nearby soil over time. Do you live in a dry western climate where alkaline soil is common? Hard water and unexplained yellowing can be clues too. Those are clues, not proof. For a simple check, a cheap pH strip from the garden store can help you make a smarter choice. Take a small soil sample, mix it with distilled water until it becomes a thin, muddy liquid. Dip the pH strip into that liquid, then compare the color with the chart on the package. If your soil is below 7, bone meal has a better chance of working. If it is above 7.5, it may be too slow and too locked up to help this year's tomatoes. A different phosphorus source may be smarter. This is not about blaming the gardener. It is about matching the fertilizer to the soil. Because even the best old farmer trick fails when the soil chemistry is working against it. Once you know these 4 mistakes, the right method becomes very simple. Here is exactly how to apply bone meal so it reaches the root zone, stays moist, stays hidden from animals, and feeds the plant the way it was meant to. Here is the planting hole method. This is simple, but the order matters. Start by digging the tomato hole deeper than normal, not just wide enough for the root ball. Tomatoes can grow new roots along buried stems, so the plant does not have to rely only on the small nursery root ball. A deeper planting hole gives the plant a bigger underground engine. More buried stem means more roots, and more roots give the plant a stronger base before the fruit load arrives. Once the hole is ready, add 1 to 2 tablespoons of bone meal to the bottom of the hole, not a handful or half the bag. 1 to 2 tablespoons is enough for one tomato plant using this method. Then cover that bone meal with a thin layer of soil, about 1 to 2 inches. This little soil layer keeps the powder away from the young root ball and buries the smell deeper, so animals are less likely to notice it. After that, set the tomato plant into the hole. If the plant is tall and leggy, remove the lowest leaves and bury part of the stem. Keep the healthy top growth above the soil, but let the lower stem become part of the root system underground. Backfill the hole and press gently, so there are no big air pockets, but do not pack it down like concrete. Roots need contact and air. Then water deeply. This first watering settles the soil, moistens the bone meal, and gives microbes the damp environment they need. The last step is mulch. Add 2 to 3 inches of mulch, but keep it slightly away from the stem. Mulch keeps the root zone moist, steadies soil temperature, and keeps the powder hidden. That is the whole method. Dig deep, add 1 to 2 tablespoons, cover it with soil, plant the tomato deep, water it in, and mulch the surface. Do it once at planting time. Then let the soil do the slow work for you. There is one more thing to talk about before we finish. And if you have pets at home, this part is not optional. Bone meal has one warning every pet owner needs to hear. Dogs love this stuff. To you, it may smell mild. To a dog, it can smell like something worth digging for. Once a dog finds that smell, it may dig up the soil, pull out the tomato plant, and try to eat whatever it finds. That can ruin the plant overnight. And if a dog eats too much bone meal, it can be dangerous. It can cause vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and in serious cases, digestive blockage or pancreatitis. That is not a wait-and-see situation. That can become an emergency vet visit. If you have dogs, do not leave bone meal on the surface. Bury it deep, cover it with soil, water it in, mulch over it, and keep pets away from that bed as much as possible. A $3 garden trick is not worth a $2,000 vet bill. There is one more thing gardeners often misunderstand later in the season. They see the lower leaves turning a little purple, and they panic. Purple leaves can look like phosphorus deficiency. So many gardeners think, I need to add more. But slow down. A purple tint does not always mean the soil is missing phosphorus. Many times, the plant simply cannot take it up. Cold soil can do that. Wet soil can do it too, because soggy roots do not breathe well. Root disease and compacted soil can also block nutrient uptake. So before you add more bone meal in the middle of the season, check the real cause. Check the soil temperature, moisture, root health, and whether the plant improves once the weather warms up. Sometimes, the smartest move is waiting, watching, and fixing the condition that is blocking the roots. Remember the second mistake. Use it correctly at planting time, then let the soil work. Before we wrap up, there is one final note for gardeners growing tomatoes in containers or raised beds. Because those gardens follow a different set of rules. Container tomatoes and raised bed tomatoes follow different rules. In the ground, roots have more space, and nutrients move through a larger area. In containers, the soil volume is small, pH can change faster, and nutrients can build up faster. So, use less than you would in the ground, mix it into the soil before planting. Do not sprinkle it on the surface, and do not keep adding more every few weeks. Raised beds can also build up phosphorus over time if you add bone meal year after year. If you want a full breakdown for containers and raised beds, comment container below, and I will make that video next. So remember this. Bone meal is simple, cheap, and old farmers used it for a reason. But it only works when the soil can actually use it. Bury it, use it once, choose a fine powder, check your pH, and let the soil do the slow work through the season. Avoid those 4 mistakes, and that $3 white powder can help your tomato plants come in heavy with fruit. If this helped, hit the like button, subscribe for more simple tomato growing tricks, and ring the bell so you do not miss the next one.